Okay, hello everyone. This video will be a walkthrough of a piece of... Python code that was written for the Blender game engine. You can see it here. To start off with, I'll go over some Python stuff. So the first line of this script is import BGE. BGE here stands for Blender Game Engine. All this means is that there's some file or a bunch of files somewhere that are sort of grouped under the name BGE, and we've essentially copied whatever's in those files and pasted it to the top of the screen. If later you wanted to include like this file somewhere or this main, you could do that with a similar statement. So that just says put all the Blender stuff at the top of this page. It's the same as if you cut and paste it to the top of the page, mostly. Then the next line, there's two blank lines, it says define main : So define here, DEF stands for define. So we're defining main. The brackets here indicate this is a function. What's a function? It's like a tiny script. In Python, when you say define main and then there's a colon, anything that is single tabbed under the main is in the main. So from here to here. Double tab is a single tab. If it was triple tabbed, it'd be fine. And then it ends at the next thing that isn't tabbed. So if we were to add another line here, like y equals 3, this isn't in main because it's not tabbed. But if I go like this, all of a sudden that's in there. Oh yeah. So why are we defining main? Similar to the import BGE, we define main so that we can just type the word main with parentheses, the brackets, and that's essentially saying put all this code right here without the... It's essentially the same as doing that. If you were to delete that code and just put this here, it would function mostly the same, if not exactly the same. I'm not sure how exactly Blender interprets some stuff. I'm more of a Python person, not a Blender person. So essentially, it's just like we paste it right here. And you might be like, well, why are we even doing that if we already wrote it right here? Well, what if you had a second function defined somewhere and you wanted to call it, and then you wanted to call main again? You know, you'd have to cut and paste more times. It just makes your life easier. And I will note that in Python, if you were to try to go like this doesn't work. You can't use things before they're defined. If you did that, Python would yell at you and be like, you're bad at Python. All right, next. We have a statement, cont equals BGE dot logic dot get current controller. So similar to how we defined main, here we're defining a variable cont. And we're defining it with what's on the right side of the equal sign. So, what is going on here? So this says, from Blender Game Engine, and then you use a dot to access the properties of it. So like if you consider Blender Game Engine to be a box, logic is something that's in the box. Or you could say something like in the real world, human.arm. So that says, from a human, get the property arm. As well, as you can see over here, since we've got another dot, there are things inside the thing. So for a human.arm.skin, which is kind of gross, but yeah, that's how you would access the skin on the arm of the human. So here we're trying to get a function, because you can see right here, so a function like main. This is defined somewhere in the BGE collection of files. There's a function just like main that's associated here, and we're saying from BGE, the Blender game engine, get the property logic, and get the current controller of the script. So that's this script right here in your Blender game engine. That's a function, not a property. So what does that mean? So the controller in Blender is sort of like the boss. You've got your actuators. They're the doers. They move things, change the color of things, hide messages, add messages. Formatting on this got messed up. Hide messages, add messages, change properties. And then there's the properties, which are sort of like the stuff in the factory. And the controller tells the workers, which are the scripts, which tools to use, the actuators. And that's how that works. That's what a controller is. The controller gets the signals, like the phone calls and the orders, and it looks at the products it has, and it tells the workers what to do. That's all. So the controller takes the actuators and it gets the signals, like your keyboard and your mouse input and stuff. And then with that, it says, hey, actuator, do a thing, and the actuator does a thing to the properties of the game object in Blender. Speaking of the game object in Blender, you can see we have here the owner is equal to the controller.owner. So this is the owner property of the controller. And this will just be your NPC, which I think in the video is a box, right? It's the box. But you could put that script anywhere, and that would be whatever it is. So if you put that script on a race car, it's a race car. If you put it on your little chibi NPC, it's that NPC. That's what this is. And the owner has its own properties and stuff. And I will note, again, so you know, import BGE is just cutting and pasting a whole bunch of stuff to the top of the file. Calling main here is like cutting and pasting all of this here. I will say exactly, referencing controller like this, it would work the same if we just go like that, and like that, and like that, and like that, and like that. The script would be the same. We could just get rid of this line. But then obviously you have to type this out every time, so why would you do that? It makes it less readable, right? So we've done controller, C-O-N-T, is equal to the property logic in Blender Game Engine and the property getCurrentController, which is a function, because of the brackets, in Blender Game Engine's logic. And we have the owner is the property owner from the controller. All right. This is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. I'm sorry. So the next set of lines, we're just, again, similar to how we did here, we're just sort of making shorter references, because I could go and put this here and go like that and delete this line, and it would work just as well, but, you know, you don't want to do that. It's sort of messy. So this says, from controller, get the property actuators, and then this might be something you don't recognize. The square brackets here mean that actuators, as a property of the controllers, like human as the property arm, actually arms, you have two arms, right? So actuators is a list. Could be empty, so it could be nothing in it, but it's a list of things that are labeled. So this would be like get arm, right arm, dot skin. So this is saying in the controller, get from the list of things that are labeled actuators, something that's labeled message. So if actuators is like a list or a bag of labeled things, there's one of the things in the bag is labeled message, and you want to get that one. And similarly here, one of the things in the bag labeled actuators is labeled, or one of the thing in the bag of stuff called actuators is called remove. And so you're just storing that here. And again, so all this is doing is putting that there. So the next line says own.txt is equal to I don't want to talk. So own.txt is a property of the owner, right? Which we got from the controller. So this is your game object, your cube or your scene or something in Blender has a variable txt, which I think in the scene it's the text that's displayed on the screen, and you're changing that to I don't want to talk. Quotes here mean it's a string. A string just means it's words. So it's not numbers, right? So in code, this is the number one if you want to multiply stuff. Like so 1 times 2. If you said own equals 1 times 2, this would give it the value 2. And it might throw an error. But rather if you go like this means it is a string that just says 1 star 2. So it is 3 letters. Whereas this is a number. If that makes sense. So it's just a word. So this is 1, 2, 5, 6, 8. It's how many letters it is. This is a sentence. Whereas if you go like this, that's nonsense. It will yell at you if you try to do that. So this is where you put your text. So where am I now? Holy crap, this is taking... I'm so sorry. All right, so what have we done so far? All we've done so far is sort of rename some stuff. We've called whatever this is, the function get current controller, whatever the result of that is, in logic that's in the Blender game engine. We called that controller, and the owner of the controller we called own. We called the thing that does messages, message, and the thing that does removing, removing. And those were in a bag called actuators that was in the thing called controller. And then we changed the text of the game object, the NPC, to I don't want to talk. All right. Then we've got if statements. So if statements are sort of functions. Everything in between the word if and the colon is going to get checked to see if it's true. So this is saying if owner time is greater than 0. Now time is a variable property that you added to the game object itself or the script. I don't actually know in Blender. You have to set this time up. That's a thing you set up on the owner, which is the square, right? So you gave the owner a property called time, and I believe in the video it's set to 50. So this is saying, is the property you added to the game called time, similar to how like there's a bunch of actuator labels here, of the owner greater than 0? If it's not, ignore this, like go right to here, go right to here. If it is, do everything that is tabbed, just like the function, everything that is tabbed under here once is in main. So like this is like if we close a folder on main, oh, that didn't work. It's that, right? Everything else. Similarly, anything that's tabbed under if is what happens if this is true. And you can paste these together with logic. You can look that up. Like, so you can check 2 things, like if own time is greater than 0 and own color is blue. You can put those together using like brackets and words. You should look that up. And the second one here, everything between the if and the colon is what's being checked. So this says if own time, that is the time property of the owner, which is a property you set, and then you attach the script to it. And that's how the controller of the script knows what the owner is. is that less than or equal to 0? So is the time property of the owner less than or equal to 0? So if the time property is less than or equal to 0, we do these two things, right? Because they're tabbed. So then we say controller, which is the script, should activate the actuator, which means tell the doer called message to do their message, and then call the doer.remove to do their remove. So these are things you set up with the Blender interface, and you link them to stuff with that interface in the video you saw. So this just says whatever you told message to do it. And whatever you told remove to do that too. I think message flips a Boolean and remove removes this text. All right, so the tabs are very important. So I said before, if I go like this isn't in main, right? Because it's not tabbed. And now this is in main, but it's not in anything else. And now it's all in main, but it's also in if. So like this is connected to this now. And if this property is never true, you'll never get here. So this is in main and if. This is just in main. And this is just in the script. And if you go like this, oh, who knows where it is? Probably don't do that. I think Python might yell at you if you do that. So now I'm going to run through the program with you. We've gone through all the lines, and I'm just going to show you what it does. So based on what I saw, when you attach the script to Blender, it'll call it every frame or, every time it checks the script. You can probably set that in Blender. So we're just going to start. So time on owner started at 50. So what happens? So the script gets loaded. It imports all of the BGE. It defines main. And then it runs main. So it goes here. And then Python will go line. Look at that. Okay, that's a definition. This is the definition. I don't have to actually do anything here. And then it gets here. And it says, okay. So now that we're here, I see this is a function. So now I need to do all these. So it says the controller is this. So it gets the controller, and then it gets the owner of the controller, and then it gets the actuator, the doer called message, and it gets the doer called remove. And it changes the text to I don't want to talk. And then we check, is own time greater than 0? Yes, it is greater than 0. It's 50. So we say own time minus equals 1. And this means, oh, so I guess I didn't mention that. Own time equals own time minus 1. That's what the minus equals means. So this is the same as this. So just so you don't have to write own time again. So now own time is 49. Is own time 0? No. So you don't do these. And then you start over again. You have the script. I don't know if Blender actually reloads the script every time. It might just call main every frame. I don't think so though, just based on another tutorial I saw. So again, load the script, import all the Blender game stuff, define main. We define it, but we don't do anything yet because it's just a definition. And then it says do main, which means all of this stuff gets here. And then just does it again. And then again, we get the controller, we get the owner, we get the message, we get the remove, we change the text. So the text is changing every time this is called. You just don't notice because it changes it to the same thing. And then again, is the time property greater than 0? Yes, it is. So we subtract it by 1. It's 8. Is it less than or equal to 0? It is not. And then similarly for like the next million times until you get to 2, the same thing will happen. We get the controller, we get the owner, we get the message, we get the remove, we change the text, you don't notice. We check, is the time greater than 0? It is. So it becomes 1. Is it less than or equal to 0? No, it's not. So we skip this. And then we do it again. We define main. We call main. And then I'm going to undo some of the changes here. So we define main. We call main, so which means we're here. So we define the controller. We define the owner. We get the thing called message that does message. We get the thing that does remove. We change the text again. We say, is owner.time greater than 0? It is. So it becomes 0. And then we check this one. Is own time less than or equal to 0? It is now, because it's 0. So this is true. So now we say, do the message and do the remove. And then from then on, it'll do the same thing every time. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I didn't realize this was going to be like a 20-minute video. If you have any questions, ask. Keep in mind, I am not a Blender expert, but I do understand Python. And I can probably look up some Blender stuff if you have any questions specifically about Blender. This is mostly directed to Carrie, who actually asked for this video to be made. So if you enjoyed this video, you should thank Carrie too. She's great. I'm giving a thumbs up to a camera that isn't on.